During the Apollo 16 mission in 1972, Charles Duke became one of the last people to walk on the moon. For many years, he kept an incredible secret about his experience on the lunar surface. He later described how the moment truly hit him. He was actually standing on the moon. The excitement, wonder, and thrill of that realization stayed with him, and what he witnessed has fascinated both space fans and skeptics for decades. Now, after 50 years, Charles Duke has finally spoken about what he saw on the moon that left him silent all these years. To understand the full story, we need to look back at the Apollo 16 mission, which was the fifth crewed flight in NASA's lunar program. Led by Commander John Young, Apollo 16 focused on exploring the Descartes Highlands, an area thought to be shaped by ancient volcanic activity. John Young was already an experienced astronaut at the time, having flown in previous missions like Gemini 3 and Gemini 10. He had been selected by NASA in 1962 and by the time of Apollo 16, had been to space 3 times. This mission made him the second American to fly into space 4 times. Charles Duke, the lunar module pilot, was 36 years old during the mission and became the youngest astronaut to walk on the moon. He was selected by NASA in 1966 and had gained valuable experience working with Apollo 10 and as a capsule communicator for Apollo 11. Although he was originally set to be part of the Apollo 13 backup crew, he unknowingly caught rubella from his child, which led to him being replaced. Even though that was a setback, he stayed dedicated to his training and was later chosen for Apollo 16. As the lunar module pilot, Charles worked closely with John Young to land the lunar module and explore the moon's surface. He took part in extravehicular activities and helped gather lunar samples. The command module pilot, Ken Mattingly, also played a vital role in the mission, piloting the command module named Casper. Ken, like Charles, had originally been assigned to Apollo 13 but was removed just before launch due to potential exposure to rubella. The training for Apollo 16 was intense and detailed. John and Charles spent months learning about lunar geology to prepare for what they might find. They took part in field trips to volcanic areas and craters on Earth to study rocks and landforms similar to those on the moon. One of their main training sites was in Sudbury, Ontario, where they examined features created by a meteorite impact, helping them understand what to look for during their mission. Their training also included using lunar tools and practicing tasks in simulated environments that mimicked the moon's low gravity. They trained with the Lunar Roving Vehicle, or Moon Rover, which was a crucial piece of equipment for the mission. This vehicle allowed them to travel greater distances across the moon's surface and collect more diverse samples. Despite its size, it was powerful enough to carry equipment and samples across the rocky terrain. With a top speed of about 8 miles per hour, it was lightweight, battery-powered, and designed to be folded and transported inside the lunar module. The rover expanded the crew's ability to explore, going far beyond the small walking range available to previous missions. But before they could use it, they had to complete months of detailed practice sessions, learning how to operate it and adapt to challenges they might face. Their training even included survival scenarios, preparing them for emergencies and helping them work efficiently in their spacesuits. Apollo 16 was a major milestone in space history. It was the first mission to use the moon rover, making it possible for astronauts to travel farther and perform more complex tasks on the lunar surface. The success of this mission showed just how far NASA had come in space exploration technology. Charles Duke's recent revelation about what he experienced on the moon adds a new layer of mystery and fascination to a mission already full of incredible achievements. What he saw has left people wondering and eager to hear more about the secrets he kept for 5 decades. They spent many long hours learning how to drive the lunar rover, practicing everything from basic movement to managing the moon's rough and rocky terrain. This vehicle wasn't just a fun tool, it was a crucial part of the mission. Without it, they wouldn't have been able to complete their scientific goals. On Earth, they trained in high-tech simulators, learning how to control the rover in various situations. Once they had mastered those, they practiced on specially built landscapes made to look and feel like the moon's surface. Driving on the moon was very different from driving on Earth. There was no air, and the gravity was much weaker, so the rover felt like it was gliding rather than driving. It was harder to judge speed and direction, and small rocks or bumps could cause big changes in movement. The astronauts had to adjust to this strange new way of driving quickly. Charles Duke, the lunar module pilot, played an especially important role. While all three astronauts trained hard, Charles had a special responsibility. He had to become an expert in using the rover's scientific tools. His job included collecting moon rocks and soil samples, performing experiments, and staying in touch with mission control to share their findings. Although Charles was relatively new to space missions, this opportunity became one of the most important moments in his career. The rover wasn't the only critical equipment they needed. The astronauts also relied on their spacesuits, which had improved a lot since the earlier Apollo missions. These suits were heavier and more advanced, built to protect them from the harsh lunar environment. Even though they were bulky, the new suits allowed better movement than before. The astronauts trained for hours in these suits, learning to move comfortably even in the moon's low gravity. Each suit had its own life support system, which gave them oxygen, kept them cool, removed carbon dioxide, and protected them from the vacuum of space. The helmet had a special visor to block the intense sunlight and the bright glare from the moon's surface. Still, walking around in those suits wasn't easy, and practice was essential. Once they were on the moon, the astronauts used their suits, the rover, and a set of special tools to collect rocks, drill into the ground, and study the moon's surface. These tools were created to help scientists learn more about the moon's history, including its magnetic field and the way its surface formed over billions of years. The rover helped them travel farther than they ever could on foot, allowing them to gather more samples and explore new areas. But how did they decide where to land in the first place? Was it connected to something strange that Charles later revealed? The story of Apollo 16 began long before the astronauts, John Young, Charles Duke, and Ken Mattingly, boarded the spacecraft. A lot of careful planning had gone into choosing the right place to land. This time, they weren't heading to just any part of the moon. They were going to the lunar highlands, a rugged, ancient part of the moon no mission had explored before. Previous missions like Apollo 14 and 15 had only explored areas near the edges of lunar plains. Scientists were curious about the highlands because they believed it held important clues about how the moon was formed. Geologists led the search for the perfect landing spot. They wanted to find rocks thrown out by ancient meteorite impacts, especially from the highlands, because they believed those rocks could tell the story of the moon's early days. One idea was to land near a giant crater called Dow. This crater had been visible from Earth for centuries and seemed like a great scientific target. But there was a big problem: the ground near Dow was too rough and dangerous for landing. Plus, it was too far from the moon's equator, making it more difficult for the spacecraft to reach. So, the scientists looked elsewhere. Eventually, they chose a region called Descartes. But picking this spot wasn't just about science. It also had to be safe. The surface needed to be flat enough for landing, but interesting enough for exploration. The final decision came after a lot of analysis and debate between scientists, engineers, and astronauts. Everyone had to agree that this site was both useful and safe. It was a bold choice, full of unknowns, but it also promised exciting discoveries. When the spacecraft finally entered orbit around the moon, John and Charles separated from the command module in the lunar lander. On April 20, 1972, they gently touched down in the rugged Descartes Highlands. The area was more challenging than expected, filled with rocks, craters, and hills that made it difficult to land smoothly. But they made it. On the first day, John and Charles put on their spacesuits and stepped outside. Their first moonwalk lasted over 7 hours. They collected rocks, tested equipment, and completed their scheduled experiments. On the second day, they used the lunar rover for the first time. It was a game changer. The rover, a lightweight electric vehicle with 4 wheels, allowed them to drive 3.1 miles farther than any astronauts had traveled on the moon before. This meant they could explore more ground, collect more rock samples, and carry heavier equipment. It gave them the ability to reach places they never could have reached on foot. The next 2 days of exploration were even more intense. On day 2, they drove out to study a giant boulder that scientists thought came from an ancient impact. The rock turned out to be full of useful geological information. They also studied nearby craters to understand how meteors had shaped the moon's surface over billions of years. by the third day, they drove almost 4 miles, setting a new record for lunar travel. They explored steep hills and deeper craters and collected even more unique rock samples. In total, they gathered over 200 pounds of moon rocks and soil. These would be studied on Earth for many years, helping scientists learn about volcanic activity and ancient impacts on the moon. One of the biggest scientific discoveries was the proof that the moon had once been volcanically active. The rocks showed clear evidence of lava flow and volcanic processes, confirming something that scientists had debated for years. But as amazing as the science was, something far more mysterious happened on that mission, something Charles Duke didn't talk about for 50 years. Charles's secret. For 5 decades, Charles Duke stayed silent about something he saw on the moon. Now, he was finally ready to talk. "It's time to tell the truth," he said. "I shouldn't have kept this hidden from the world for so long." What had he seen? During one of their long work sessions on the lunar surface, Charles was standing near the rover, focused on his tasks. Suddenly, out of the corner of his eye, he saw something move. It was small, dark, and fast. It darted across the ground, near the rover, and disappeared. At the time, he thought maybe it was a trick of the light, or just his tired eyes playing games with him. After all, space exploration is exhausting. Maybe it was a shadow, or even a smudge on his helmet visor. But the image stayed in his mind. Long after the mission was over, he couldn't forget that moment. As time passed, he started wondering more and more about what he had seen. Could it have been something real? Years later, Charles asked NASA to review the footage from their mission. The cameras on the rover and their suits had recorded nearly everything. He hoped that maybe, just maybe, the cameras had picked up what he had seen that day. And they had. In the footage, Charles found something shocking. A dark shape, moving quickly across the lunar surface, appeared in the video. It wasn't just a blurry shape or a shadow. It was clearly something large, something moving with purpose. When he compared its size to the rover, he was stunned. The mysterious figure was nearly as big as the vehicle, maybe even larger. The lunar rover was 10 feet long and 7 feet wide. For something to match that size, it had to be massive. This wasn't a small animal. It was a giant, unknown creature, gliding across the moon's surface in silence. No one had ever seen anything like it before. Charles couldn't explain what it was. He didn't know if it was an unknown space creature, an unexplained natural phenomenon, or something beyond our understanding. But he knew it wasn't a dream. It wasn't imagination. It was real, and the footage proved it. Now, the question is, what else is out there? The universe is huge, full of mysteries we haven't even begun to understand. And maybe, just maybe, we're not alone even on the moon. Do you think Charles really saw something? Or was it just a strange trick of light and shadow? Let us know in the comments.